Welcome to the Astrologers Challenge. This edition is the March April edition. This is the one, the only, and the original Astrologers Challenge on YouTube, except no imitations or substitutions. So, test your skills, test your knowledge. This is intended for all astrological levels. There is no win lose in this series. So this is all about improving our own skills. Answer and analysis of the mystery chart to be revealed in the following video of the series. So have fun. This has been brought to you by Miss Jenny, astrologer, soothsayer, and intergalactic citizen. You can reach me at primalgirlwellness@gmail.com or here through Astrology. Please note, folks, that I am on hiatus from doing readings. So if you are looking for a reading from me, please do not send money. Do not send money to Astrology for it, and do not send money to me for it. I won't get them, and I can't get to the readings until after April, easily after April. So it may be well into May before I start doing anything. And again, as always, check in for my availability and my estimated turnaround time on your readings before committing to it, because we'd hate for you to have to go through all that trouble and have your money refunded because you didn't hear from me. All right, so let's get to last episode's chart. So the last episode chart that we had was this one. So we had someone who was a Pisces with an Aries moon, Virgo rising. Their chart ruler Mercury was retrograde in Aquarius in the fifth house. And the question was, what is this person famous for? So the person in question is Steve Jobs. For those of you who knew that, congratulations. And Steve Jobs has a pretty interesting history. So he is testament that being talented or incredibly smart or incredibly good looking or any combination of the three does not necessarily make you a good person. But we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so the first thing is we need to look at who is this person. So we have the sun in Pisces in the sixth house, and we have the moon in Aries in the seventh. So and Virgo's rising, so the sun is in Virgo's house. So the first thing this tells us is that this person is probably very either health conscious or a bit of a germaphobe, or a little OCD. And I'm not sure about his germaphobe hygiene stuff in his personal life, but we do know that he was very OCD about stuff. With the moon in Aries in the seventh house, we also know that he's very impulsive when it comes to relationships. And the moon in Aries Aries anywhere will tend to make people selfish, very self-centered and selfish. So he's got the moon and Mars in Aries. With the moon in Aries, people tend to be very self-serving in terms of their personal needs. They are the infants of the zodiac. Oftentimes, they don't actually do this out of any malice. The signs later in the zodiac will tend to be more conscious of other people and ride roughshod over them. With moon in Aries, it's literally very infantile, me kind of attitude towards life. And in the seventh house, it means that in his relationships, he tends to be very impulsive and also very infantile, making this typically all about him. The moon in his chart rules that 11th house, so he tends to make partners out of his friends. This also doesn't necessarily bode well, because what this also means is that in terms of intimate relationships, he has difficulty maintaining intimate one-on-one relationships because it doesn't offer him enough variety, or stimulation or freedom to move, and lots of onerous responsibility, which Aries is not fond of. So that can be problematic. The seventh house ruler, which would be Neptune and or Jupiter, depending which rulership you're using. Jupiter is retrograde in the 10th house, so work would always be an issue for him in terms of relationships, mostly because he would probably hide behind his work. With Jupiter ruling the 7th house in retrograde in 10th, it's somebody who they look like they're workaholics, but really they're hiding behind their work to avoid dealing with issues in their relationships. Jupiter conjunct Uranus like this, both retrograde. He has a very difficult time dealing with his feelings, and the needs of other people. He doesn't like needy people. That moon in Aries further reinforces that. So one of the dysfunctional things he will do is that he will absolutely hide behind his work to avoid having to deal with the care and maintenance of other people's feelings. Which isn't to say that he's going to be like this absolutely, but if he were going to use a coping mechanism, that's the one he would use. Okay. If we're using Neptune as the 7th house ruler, Neptune is in Libra retrograde in the 2nd house. And again, another retrograde planet ruling 7th house. These relationships are not easy. They're just not. And oftentimes with the retrograde planets ruling 7th house, there's a bit of a blind side. So there's a lot he just doesn't get, or it takes him longer to process and figure things out than it does other people. So when we talk about someone being clueless in a relationship, like literally this is the kind of stuff we're looking at. Moon in Aries in the 7th, Jupiter and or Neptune, both retrograde ruling the 7th, completely clueless. Now, Neptune, if it's the ruler of the 7th house, retrograde in Libra, also makes a tight opposition to Mars in Aries in the 8th house. So again, issues of being very selfish and being very blind to our selfishness is there. Also, there is the chance, so there's always the chance of ripping people off or being ripped off, like the flim flam man lives here, when you've got this type of thing going on with Neptune. So Neptune with Mars, and Mars ruling the 8th house, Neptune in the 2nd, Neptune ruling the 7th house of partnerships and other people, one-to-one, face-to-face relationships. So victimization and being taken advantage of, exploitation, the flim-flam man, con artistry, is often an issue in relationships with this particular aspect. Which side of the coin we're actually going to be on is an entirely different conversation having a lot to do with the development of our character. Now, the thing about it is, if you look at his Mars, it is, I'm sorry, I'm assuming you guys know where everything is. His Mars is part of a grand trine with Pallas Athene. And even without the grand trine, it's still part of a trine with Pluto. Okay? So this is going to make him, give him more protection in relationships and a lot more strength than his partners necessarily would. Because remember, his partners are here. So there's a lot of vulnerability here. Okay, and a lot of inability to act with that. So I would say that if anybody were going to get taken advantage of, it's more often than not going to be him. Because also remember, Moon in Aries and Mars in Aries, he's all about himself, me. Because even in his relationships, right, it's still all about him. Wow, I can't even imagine trying to have a relationship with this guy. But some people like that, so God bless you all that like being involved with people who are all about themselves. Jesus. Anyway. So we look at the 10th house and we look at the 2nd house for vocation and occupation and stuff like that. It gets a little tricky because it's not a cut and dry sort of thing. But it can tell us in what ways we best express ourselves vocationally. So in his particular case, we're looking at a couple of things. So we've got Jupiter and Uranus here, and we've got Mercury ruling the 10th house. So before we get into the rulership of the 10th house, the first thing we have to examine is that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the 10th house. So with Jupiter and Uranus together, obviously, what we have is somebody who likes freedom. Jupiter and Uranus both love lots of freedom, lots of space to move. They don't like being hemmed in by convention or other people's expectations of them. Or the feeling of obligation, which is very Cancer. They don't like feeling obligated to other people or beholden to their rules. So we can expect also a lot of visionary qualities. People who are not bound, hogtied and bound to social convention rules are often seen as visionaries because they are willing and able to take risks other people will not only in action but also in their thinking. So with Jupiter and Uranus together, we would expect somebody who is one of two things, either a complete anarchist or somebody who is a visionary and is constantly looking for the next horizon or vista ahead. Now, with Mercury ruling that 10th house, right, Mercury's down here retrograde in Aquarius. So the thing about it is now we're looking at this thing, and it's in the 5th, and we're like, well, wait a minute, what does that mean? Shouldn't that mean he's in the arts, something creative, like, or maybe computers and astrology and science, because it is Aquarius. So here's what's interesting. The thing with, and remember, the thing with charts is we have a limited amount of information available to us, and the world is constantly changing. So things that we may see as vocations now are going to be dwarfed by the progress and evolution and changes of industry as we move forward in time. So these jobs may not even exist in the future, or there may be so many other possible expressions of these planetary signatures that we don't even know what these jobs are yet because they don't exist yet. So it gets a little tricky when we're trying to define vocation in an astrology chart. You got to remember that it's not a cut and dry cookie cutter recipe thing. So with Mercury ruling that 10th house, Gemini on the midhaven is going to give somebody who technically is usually involved in more than one career or is involved in some type of communication heavy industry, right? Because that's where they're most comfortable. And of course, he was involved with computers, which is all about communication and information. Mercury in Aquarius will lend itself to technology and science. But again, it's that being free of convention and social obligational sort of stuff that really drives this train. So there's always that need to look for that cutting edge future sort of stuff, like moving forward. With Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, we might have somebody who has difficulty processing information. So this may be somebody who's on the autism spectrum. I'm not completely sure what his deal was, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had some level of Asperger's syndrome. Definitely somebody who's possibly on the autism spectrum. Also with Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, there's the possibility of vision problems or some type of brain issue. Didn't he die of a brain tumor? I'm not completely sure. I'm sorry, I should have read up more on his biography. Forgive me. It's been a busy month. But definitely brain wiring, all sort of stuff. There's something that's not firing correctly there, which will be a hindrance for him and certainly problematic. With Mercury in Aquarius retrograde in the 5th house, though, here comes the mystery. Like, what does that 5th house tell us? Because he's clearly not famous for being a musician. He's not, involved in acting. He's not a fashion designer. Like, what is that about? Well, remember the 5th house is creativity and it's the arts. It's also speculation and gambling. But in this particular case, we're talking about his vocation. And one of the things that we do know that Apple is famous for, Apple built its brand not necessarily on innovative programming or technology, but the thing that has made Apple famous, that literally has catapulted it into the stratosphere, is design. So everything about Apple rests on design, and that has been the thing that drives the train for him and this company. And that, my friends, is where that 5th house comes in. So design, this is how he has applied that 10th house ruler in the 5th house. Okay? And with Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, a couple of things. So Mercury, we know, rules that 1st house. Okay? And Virgo and Mercury, or the Virgo side of Mercury, is very much about simplicity and cleanliness and clean lines and organization and minimalism. And what is Apple all about? Minimalism, clean lines, like literally get into the absolute essential, like razor blade edge of something. Also, get rid of this, sorry. Also, with Mercury ruling that 1st house and his 10th house, both in the 5th retrograde, the other thing is this is deeply personal for him. So his proverbial psychic fingerprints were all over his product lines, more so than other people, and he would have been personally invested in every step of the operation. So that could also lend the appearance of being a bit of a control freak. Well, just a little bit weird, a little bit difficult to work with. Now, some people would say that Saturn and Scorpio in the 3rd house is going to give you the control freak issues, but that's not necessarily the case. Saturn and Scorpio in the 3rd indicates a lot of problems with contracts and a lot of resistance to formal agreements. It is trine that Jupiter Uranus in the 10th house. So he would have benefited from that OCD, anal retentive, um, almost power hungry desire to have ironclad exclusive agreements, because that's a very Saturn and Scorpio in the third, with people he did business with. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know the details, somebody out there might know it better. I'm pretty sure that one of the things that Apple is also very well known for is their um, almost, what is the word I'm looking for? Almost prison warden type of constrictions on what their partners can do or not do, and all this sort of stuff. Like their contracts and their reach with those contracts was probably as bigger than Amazon. Um, so that's where we see that Saturn in Scorpio in the third. This Mercury in Aquarius retrograde ruling that first and that 10th means a personal investment in everything that we're doing, because it is literally a part of us. Okay, so in his day-to-day business operations, I would have expected to see him very much invested in everything, like almost to the point of micromanaging and making people crazy. Um, because also remember, Moon in the seventh, it's all about him. It's all about him, and that's rules that 11th house of groups and teams. So even in his teams and stuff, who he makes his partners, it's all about him. Okay. Now, some other things that we should be looking at. So, and then we're going to finish this up because it's just literally a very, very brief overview. So we have Mars trining Pluto out of the 8th and the 12th. So that's going to... that, and it's opposing Neptune. So I'm not going to get too much into this, but I will say in terms of an adult partner, there he not for me. It would have... No, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. I'm so sorry, kids. I'm not going to go there. But I will say that when it comes to stamina and endurance and really giving it your all and making it the most important thing that you can possibly be present and participating with, work always trumped everything else. Yikes. Okay. Sorry. All right. Now, really quickly before I go, also too, now look, right? I almost forgot this. He's got Venus in Capricorn as part of this T square with Mars and Neptune. So this particular T square, and it's coming out of the second 8, 2, 4, 8. This particular T square can lend itself to money grubbing behavior, because Venus in Capricorn is very much about the legacy and what is the word I'm looking for? Legacy and having dynasties. Yes, dynasties. Venus and Cap in the fourth is very much about dynasties. And with that second 8th house emphasis, this further reinforces that particular trait in Venus and Capricorn. Now, with Mars and Neptune in opposition, we already talked about this business about being really difficult in relationships because he tends to have a lot more overreach and a lot less generosity when it comes to his partners. Venus squaring Mars and Neptune also makes him wildly suspicious of other people, very mistrustful, which would also probably explain, not really explain, but certainly reinforce that paranoid Saturn and Scorpio and those horrible contracts I'm sure he wrote up. And it's going to... It's a funny thing with this particular aspect. So on the one hand, he treats people like crap. Like literally, he treats people like crap. Because he rides roughshod over other people. He literally doesn't see what he's doing. And then when he has to get called on it, he goes hides behind his work. So he doesn't want to deal with it. And also, too, he's very much about the king and I sort of thing. So he's got a whole little fantasy world going on in his head about how the world is operating around him. And when it bumps up against reality, typically with this chart, it would be other people that get hurt more than he does. So I'm sure he's frequently having people at a disadvantage when it comes to dealing with him. However, the thing is with Aries, with Moon in Aries and Mars in Aries and Venus in Capricorn, in this particular instance, he's got a thing for young ladies. And don't twist it, folks. I'm not calling him a pedophile, for God's sakes. But he does like younger women, and his blind spot and Achilles heel will be younger women every single time. So a bit of just desserts there, that his infantile selfishness would get its payback and comeuppance by somebody who really is infantile and selfish because they don't have any life experience yet. So that's pretty funny. Anyway, sorry. Okay. I think that's all we're going to cover for today. Some interesting things that I wanted to mention, though, that were listed in his bio. So apparently he was adopted shortly after birth. So some things that I pose to you are, can you find the signature or the suggestion that there was some change immediately after birth, some major change? One of the things that I would tell you to look for is right here. So obviously we're going to look for the fourth house ruler, which in this case is Jupiter, right? And Jupiter's over here, all right? The closest hard aspect that Jupiter makes is going to be here, which is going to move into a conjunction with Uranus. They're both retrograde. So the thing about it is, I'm pretty sure he was adopted before he was 4 years old. Somebody would have to check the records for that. But Jupiter and Uranus would certainly indicate a change or some type of major disruption or break in the early home environment. Okay, never learned to code, which is reading and writing computer program languages. And right there, he's not interested. So, rarely showered. Oh, wait, sorry. At one company, he was moved to the night shift when working due to due to complaints about his hygiene. He rarely showered and walked around barefoot in the offices. So some of that's a passive-aggressive thing. And passive-aggressive behavior is absolutely the domain of the 6th and the 12th house, right? So the 6th more than the 12th. With the 12th house, you get a lot of gaslighting. With the 6th, it's definitely passive-aggressive stuff. And Pisces is very well known for passive-aggressive behavior. So I wouldn't necessarily, we don't really know what this was about, but so I wouldn't necessarily say that this was a de facto setting in his chart, as much as a passive-aggressive sort of response or a big FU to his employers. Because remember, he doesn't like being constrained at his jobs to the rules and expectations of other people. He stole from his partner and co-founder of the company. When the pair first created a profitable product, they planned on splitting the pay 50-50. Although they were given $5,000 for the game, he told his partner they got $700, leaving his partner to take home $350, while he pocketed the other $4,650. So right there, we can see a dysfunctional expression of that moon in Aries. Me, it's all about me, it's mine, it's me, right? In that 7th house, to hell with my partners, it's still all about me. Neptune in the 2nd, the flim-flam man, right? Mars ruling that 8th house, opposing Neptune, the con artist, right? The flim-flam man. And also, again, pulling in that 7th house. He's not good with partnerships. I don't know that he was ever good with partnerships after that, but that's certainly a sign of things to come. Because it's all about him. It's all about him. And finally, he was no philanthropist. In fact, in the early days of his business, he cut the company's philanthropic programs, saying they would return when the company was more profitable. Despite the business' enormous success, the charitable programs were never reinstated. So for philanthropy and charitable works, we look at the 11th and the 12th house, which is the moon and the sun, right? So here we've got the moon. Here we go, that moon and that 7th house for the partners. This is about him, always him. Okay, and then maybe we might look at the 12th house for charitable work, right? So the 12th house is the sun conjunct the vertex in that 6th house, which should have given him some philanthropic leaning or tendencies. But there was none. So we can't predict how these things are going to go. And also, too, Saturn in Scorpio is about sharing your resources. It's not necessarily sharing your resources with another individual. It's about legacy and what we share and leave behind for other people, right? And how we exchange resources. It's about mutual support. So with Saturn in Scorpio, if we're going to go down the road talking about karma in this lifetime, one of the biggest lessons he had to learn had a lot to do with loyalty, honor, and also sharing resources. And it would appear that at many junctures in his life, he has failed at all of them. So here's the thing that I would say, and you guys who are so big on, throwing the word karma around like this means something. Here's a man who has failed at his evolutionary demand, which is learning about loyalty and sharing resources, mutual support, utilizing resources, and also, oh my God, I just said it. Old age is not for sissies. And honor. She's sorry, and honor, right? And he's not been as in at critical junctures when the test was given. He has obviously not lived up to honor. He denied his daughter for her entire life, basically, or his entire life. After she was born, refused to pay child support because he claimed the daughter wasn't hers. He ripped off his first partner in life. We should have set up a philanthropic charity organization and shared his resources with a community that supports him and helps him achieve a profit, and did not. Over and over and over again at many junctures, he did not live up to the requirements of his karmic demand, which is that Saturn in Scorpio. So the thing about it is, in spite of all that, he still was wildly successful. So the thing I want you guys basically, I guess, to understand is that when it comes to karma is not about punishment, in the here and now. Karma is cause and effect, it's consequences. And it's also in terms of your development, it's about what you're here to work through and improve upon and develop and get past. Saturn are those obstacles in your way in terms of evolving and getting out of the karmic cycle or repeating loop of reincarnation. So it is entirely possible for people to look successful on the outside and be complete messes, karmically or spiritually speaking, on the inside. These are not the same thing, and it's not for us to determine if this is working or if this isn't working. I mean, clearly we can look at an astrology chart and say, this is what's required of you, but only the person knows where they have lived up to or failed in those expectations of them or themselves in this lifetime. So I believe he died of a brain tumor, which is pretty apropos given that his chart ruler is Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, right? And in the 5th house. So that brain tumor could easily have been all this energy that was stuck because he was not working through his Saturn correctly. Okay. And because all of this involved that 5th house, it was very much about his life source. This is very much a very personal thing for him. And the thing that I'm sure he held most dear to himself as far as his vanity was concerned was his brain, and that it's the very thing that he ended up losing and destroyed him by the end of his life because he did not fulfill the evolutionary demands of his Saturn. So for people who would say that, he screwed me over and he's going to get his and blah, 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 blah. Listen, I wouldn't wish some of this stuff on anybody. I really wouldn't. And at the end of the day, it's not about that. Okay. It's very much about what we're here to do to be better versions of ourselves. So that's that. Karma is a tricky word. I get tired of people throwing the word karma around like it means something and they don't even understand what they're talking about. Okay. So that, my friends, is the chart for Steve Jobs. That was last episode's Astrologers Challenge. Now, for this episode, going into April, May, this is the chart. Now, before we get started, remember, these are the rules. Do not spoil the game by announcing the answer in the comments if you recognize the chart. This is intended to be a fun game and learning exercise for other folks, so please don't ruin it for them. 2, this is not a pass-fail game. Use this game as an exercise to improve or test your skills by doing a blind reading of a chart and mostly to have fun. It's a puzzle, not a final exam. 3, if you are an advanced astrologer and you would like more technical information like about parallels, midpoints, etc., please ask in the comment section of the video. I might not always be able to get that information to you for various reasons. Do the best that you can with the traditional information in front of you first. Thanks. And finally, 4, have fun with it. The difference between smart and genius is that genius never stops learning. No one expects anyone of any skill level to be able to get 100% on every blind chart or even 50%. There's a lot we're still learning about astrology and how it manifests in real time. We can't know everything. And my happy thought for the day is, remember, the difference between genius and stupidity is that genius has its limits. All right, this is our new chart. So this person is a celebrity, obviously. I would put my Aunt Gretchen up here, but nobody knows my Aunt Gretchen, so it's a little hard to verify the chart. This person is a celebrity, and they are famous for something. Well, they're famous for a couple of things. So rather than getting into what they're famous for, what I would like you guys to do is give me your best guess what this person's occupation might be, or any other interesting things you might be able to pick up about their personality or character by looking at the chart. And the answer to this chart will be in the next month episode of the Astrologer Challenge. See ya!